The year 2020 may be coming to a close. The election season has only just begun. And if there's one thing we know about politics, it's this: things are almost never as they seem. Welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We are now witnessing the Prime Minister make regular rounds on the family islands. The PLP continues with a unified front, and the DNA is making another formidable challenge. Tonight on The Record, we take a deep dive into the realities of politics. Don't move. We'll be back on the other side of this break. The project really pays itself back.
Correct.
They set up
at the conference, more at the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and tonight we discuss the realities of politics. Is it all that it seems to be? My first guest is no stranger to frontline politics and promises to give us some insight into what really goes on in the sometimes twisted and suspenseful world of politics. He was first elected to the House of Assembly back in 1987 under the Pindling administration and served once again from 2002 to 2007 and from 2012 to 2017. He's a licensed and trained pilot. You don't see that a lot in politicians. He was also called to the Bahamas Bar in 1985. He is a former Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries and Local Government and former MP for the Maikal constituency. It is my honor to welcome Mr. V. Alfred Gray to On the Record. Sir, so glad you could make it.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I hope that I can add to the debate.
Oh, I'm sure you can. I mean, you are no stranger to political discussions and even more so politics. So let's sort of jump right in and give people just a quick historical reference. You were first elected in 1987 under then Prime Minister Lyndon Pindling. For you, what was the motivating factor to get into politics at that time? And also, how has it changed, do you think, or has it changed in terms of what motivates people to get into politics nowadays?
Well, my motivation for getting into politics in 1987 was the need which Sir Lyndon convinced me existed for young people like myself to become a part of the political landscape. I fell in love with Sir Lyndon's ethics and his political acumen, and I just wanted to be a part of what he was doing. And having provided me the opportunity in 1987, I accepted. And I don't know whether I succeeded in any way at all, but I enjoyed the years that I spent in frontline politics.
Now, 5 years later, 1992, that was a significant date in the political history of the Bahamas. For the first time since 1967, the PLP was defeated. We would have had a new government, a new prime minister, an entirely new look to the face of party, or to the face of governance, I should say, at that point. But looking back, what would you say would have led to the defeat of the PLP back then in 1992?
Well, you know, nothing lasts forever. politics is just that as well. And so after Sir Lyndon's political prime ministership had lasted for 25 plus years, I just simply believe that the people wanted a change. Certainly, they couldn't come better than Sir Lyndon. You could improve on what Sir Lyndon did, but I do not know of anybody who will be honest to say that Sir Lyndon, even when the time came for him to have lost the election, had not done a lot for the Bahamian people and to improve the patrimony of the Bahamian people in politics. And so the time had just come for a change, and Bahamians at that time embraced Mr. Ingram as that agent of change. Whether we got positive or negative change is a matter for the individual to assess. And I'm sure the FNMs would say that he did a lot. The PLP might say he did some things. And so it's a matter of political reasoning and kind of observations, which you will get from people to people and from place to place. But for me, I thought Mr. Ingram did some things positive. And then it came back to Mr. Christie, and we have Mr. Minnis now. And so all of those leaders, in my view, took the Bahamas a little further than they met it when they came to office. Politics, in my view, have changed, though, because it seemed to me that it has become more personal rather than for the people. Sir Lyndon's start of the political era, as much as I am aware, was basically to improve the life of the Bahamian people. I do not see that today in what I see. And like I said, everybody made some contributions, but it seemed to have gotten gradually less the Bahamian people than the politicians and the politics of the day.
So, I mean, you know, historians and supporters would always continue to tell us that, you know, those first few terms of the PLP under a Pinling administration, he was able to get a lot done. You know, is it natural that after, you know, your first few terms and once you've gotten the country to a particular point, is it almost natural then to change the focus a bit? Because, you know, if we're honest, there were some things that had to be done in the 60s when the PLP took over, and then you fast forward to independence, there were almost some critical things that had to be done for the nation. But we're in a different time. The needs are different. The people are different. Even the world we live in is so very different. And I back to your original point. As you've said, it doesn't seem that that leaders are as focused on people. But does the time call for that?
Well, the time is always right to do right. And my view is that the people must always be the central focus of political leaders, because if you don't take them along with you, you are almost going alone. And my view is that, I mean, you can ask the Bahamian people, perhaps I'm just one person's opinion, but I do not believe that by and large, the Bahamian people today feel that they are a part of the governance of this country or the beneficiary in the main as it relates to their lives' improvement. And like I said, that's my opinion.
Sure.
And I believe if you walk the street, you would hear that almost by and large coming from the Bahamian people.
I'm going to say this as we move into another line of questioning, but it could be one of the reasons why we continue to change governments every 5 years. People just are not comfortable with what they're getting from government, and at the first opportunity they change. So that, you know, that may be a reason. Of course, we'd have to get some analysts in here to talk a little bit more about that. But I want to speak, though, about this, the whole political life, and you've been elected quite a few times. What are some of the realities of being re-elected? it's one thing to offer yourself for the first time, but what are some of the challenges of coming back to the people once you've been in Parliament already?
Well, Jerome, my philosophy has always been people don't care about you unless they know you care about them. Period. And so I think my re-elections from time to time to the halls of Parliament was simply because the people believed I cared about them. And they gave me their support because they knew at all times they could get my support, and whatever I was able to do for them, I did. And because it was never about me.
You were first elected. So you were first elected to the Carmichael constituency, correct? And then moved to Michael, which is where I think you finished. You then continued to run for and be elected. Help us to understand the difference between representing a New Providence constituency and a Family Island constituency.
Well, the dynamics are totally different. And I'll use my Michael representation as an example. The Michael constituency has within its borders some 5 islands, and my constituency in Carmichael had just borderlines or perimeters. And so I could have visited Carmichael's constituency in different parts every day. If you looked at the Macau constituency, I was not able to visit more than once or twice per month. And even when you visited Maguana or Inagua or Acklands or Crooked Island, you have not basically visited the constituency until you have made the rounds, as it were.
And these are big islands.
These are, well, big islands with a few people.
Right.
Because the largest of them is Inagua, which is the 3rd largest island in the Bahamas, and have a population of about 1,200 people. The smallest of those would have been Long Key, which has a population of less than 20 persons. But they are no less important than Carmichael for me, that had a population of 4,000 or 5,000 people. And so the dynamics were different, but my interest in people remained the same.
You're obviously no stranger to campaigning and the campaign trail. What are some of the experiences like when you're out there on the campaign trail? And particularly, I want to talk to those who are entering politics for the first time or considering it. Give us sort of a snapshot of what you face and these people and what these folks are about to get themselves into in terms of offering themselves for candidates.
Well, I believe that politics, in terms of getting in and getting out, remain the same. I think the motive for getting in and out might change from person to person from time to time. But those who are getting into politics, my advice is to remain focused on the people you represent. If you do that and they know you are interested in them, you will always succeed. I was defeated in 2017, and I honestly believe it was not of my own doings, because if you go to my former constituency now, most, if not all of them, those who supported me and those who did not, would probably tell you that I had been a good representative. I think I got caught up in the swing, and that's how politics is. You yourself may be okay, but you are associated with a party, and if the Bahamian people feel that that party is not good for them at the time they're voting, you get caught up in that. And so those who are going into politics must keep an open mind, because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And losing is part of the political landscape. You don't have any seat. The seat belongs to the people. Mm-hmm. And as long as you go in knowing that, you come out sometimes financially bruised, but mentally you should be willing and able to go on with your life.
I want to give a little historical context again. In 1997, which was the last time any political party was able to take a consecutive win, this was the F&M second term, I seem to remember that the Family Islands played a critical role for the F&M and then Prime Minister Ingram. To some extent, again, I think in 2007 and maybe in 2017. Family islands are always so critical. I mean, in analysis, we always say, well, whichever way the southern part of New Providence goes, that's the way of the election. But that may not be the case. And it seems that this Prime Minister is already going into the Family Islands, announcing projects, etc. From what you're able to see, do you think that's a strategy that he's looking at in terms of solidifying the Family Islands first?
Well, I believe the present Prime Minister has seen the images of defeat. And I'm not going to say where. I think he believes the Family Islands are more vulnerable than New Providence. And he seeks to prey on the vulnerability of those Family Island people because they need the government almost without exception. And I think the Prime Minister, being who he is, preys on the weak. But I don't believe it's a strategy that should work in and of itself. I think the Bahamian people in the Family Islands are more educated. They are smarter than a lot of people think. And they are now aware of 5 years of suffering cannot be substituted by sweet talk a couple of months before elections. They're a little smarter, and that's, I believe, will be found out sooner rather than late.
That's a good way for us to go into to our first break. We're going to invite our audience to stay with us. We're going to continue our conversation with the one and only V. Alfred Gray. You're watching On the Record. Project really pays itself.
Correct.
They set up
at the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
Welcome back to On the Record, the realities of politics. I'm joined tonight by former Cabinet Minister and Parliamentarian, Mr. V. Alfred Gray. Sir, we were having a really in-depth discussion on Family Islands, the Michael constituency you would have represented for a number of years, and I know that you are a Family Island man, even by your heritage and your work in that area. But I want to talk about the lack of Family Island development. You know, successive governments across the board have not done for the Family Islands everything that should have been done. Having represented that segment of the country, which is most times the most forgotten, unfortunately, you know, where would you say that some of the greatest gaps and deficiencies would have come? And I don't mean any particular administration, because I think everybody is guilty of it. But you know, where would you categorize some of the greatest issues with the Family Islands, some of the greatest shortfalls that would have come to those islands?
Mr. Sawyer, you know, the southeastern Bahamas stand in great contrast to the rest of the Bahamas, from Long Island go down to Grand Bahama. The economic development of those southeastern islands of the Bahamas have always been very stagnant. And I am not sure And I think you put it very honestly that every administration share the blame for that. The reason for it, I personally do not know, except to say that I do know that there is little economy outside Inagua, where Morton Salt provides an economic foothold for the people of Inagua. After you would have left Inagua and come down to Long Island, all of the islands in between seem to suffer economically more than any other islands in the Bahamian chain. Now, we may have to have a commission appointed to find out why that is so. But in a few words, I think it's because successive governments perhaps did not pay sufficient attention to those islands' development. You can't blame the people because they're there waiting. And I'm not sure you could blame any particular government. And so it all falls in the lap of the government because the people cannot of themselves do all, especially the infrastructural things that are required for development to take place easily. And so investors are attracted to islands where they feel that having invested, they could get their returns on their money within a reasonable time.
Mr. Gray, I've got to ask you this, though. You would have, as the MICAL representative, you sat at the cabinet table under a Christie administration within the PLP. You know, what was the conversation? Why weren't you able to advance this to which you speak or get the government to pay closer attention to those southeastern islands when you sat around the cabinet table, you know, and helped to make the decisions for the country?
Well, I was privileged, and I thank God for the opportunity given to me by Prime Minister Christie to do so. But government is not, government does not succeed or fail on the efforts of one cabinet minister or member of parliament. It has to be a collective will to make things happen. I would not go into my personal efforts to advance those islands because it may be legendary, but it is not, and it has never been, about a single MP doing what needs to be done. It is the collective will of a government, because no MP will be able on his own or her own to do everything in the constituency he represents without the government support.
So would you say it was a lack of will then?
I think if I were to answer you from the days of Sir Lyndon to now, that would be my view. It seemed to me that the efforts of the government to develop the Bahamas was more or less concentrated in the northern and central Bahamas.
No secret there. No secret there at all.
And that's my personal view. And
I understand.
It may be because the government feels that they are the islands that will give the country the greatest economic return for the investment which they may make. I don't know the answer.
I understand. And of course, it's worth discussing, but I think you hit the nail on the head a couple of times with the answer that you gave. Now, I want to move into our current political climate. From where you sit, being a member of the party and having been involved for so many years, how effective has the PLP been in opposition since the last election when you consider the small numbers within Parliament?
Well, opinions change from person to person, and I have some views which I will not express publicly, but I do feel that the opposition could be stronger in its verbiage, meaning on what it utters, rather than dependent on social media for its dissemination. I wish, and I don't say this grudgingly, I wish I was in Parliament right now.
What would you be doing differently?
What would I be doing differently?
Yes.
Well, certainly the government will know that one Alfred Virginius Cornelius Gray is here. That's the first thing. Because I cannot remain silent and allow the government as it is now. I would not have remained silent without putting their feet to the fire every time. And there are lots of reasons to put their feet to the fire. Mind the opposition is doing some things, but I wish, and this is my personal view, I wish they would be a little more strong in their fight. They do so much, but people probably don't know what they're doing because the fight may not be as public as I believe it should or could be. And so a lot of what they're doing may be done under the radar. And the place I believe the fight should take place is in Parliament, where they have live television and they have a national audience. Listen, I know you know I'm not praying for this, but I wish I was there because somehow I feel that's where I should be right now. God knows why I'm not.
Yeah, I remember clearly your some of your legendary times in the House of Assembly and the debates and the criticisms that came. So I know so that you are well capable of it. But I do want to switch gears now and talk about, get your feedback on the current performance of this administration. I'm going to call it our FNM, our report card on the FNM's governance thus far. I'm just going to run a few areas past you, and like a report card, you give us between an A and F on what you think or how you think the government has responded. Let's start with the economy. Give us a grade between A and F.
Do we have any economic activity that is visible? I don't know. So I will give them an F minus.
F minus. Dorian response.
I would think that the Prime Minister, with his lockdown and dictatorial...
Not the COVID, sir. Dorian, Hurricane Dorian response. Let's start.
Dorian,
yes.
About that. I think because I am always thinking about the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Dorian, Abaco and Grand Bahama has indicated that he has failed. So failure means F.
The COVID response, which you started to speak to previously.
Yeah, I think given all that he has done, the way he has done it, I would give him a C plus, a B maybe, because I think the lockdown in certain instances were necessary. I'm not sure his bringing the country with him deserves any credit because he seemed to have done it all on his own. There is an opposition. And I believe if he had been able to bring the opposition into this national problem, I would feel better because no answers are all in the government. And I do not believe the Prime Minister wanted the opposition to be a part of what he was doing by his behavior. And that to me was very necessary because half of the country voted for the opposition and about half voted for the government. So if he had done it as a national effort, I think he would have gotten a better review.
Okay, I'll come back to that, time permitting, but I do want to move on to some other things on the report card. Family Island development, of which we just spoke at length.
Well, like I said, I don't know of any. I heard of some pronouncements for Grand Bahama and other places, but I don't know of any ongoing development that gave rise to the economic relief in those islands which are sorely needed. I heard some announcements in Eleuthera, Grand Bahama, Dulukaya, but what has happened to bring relief, economic relief to the people on those islands, I say I don't see it. And the people who live on these islands have not pronounced it. So I don't know.
What ladder would you give then between A and F?
For economic development, I would say maybe a D.
Okay. Transparency and good governance.
F. They came into government talking about transparency and everything above board, but everything this government, from the Orban deal to the hotel deal in Freeport, nothing has been transparent. You have to beg them to tell you what's going on in the various fields that should be a part of the public knowledge so that the people know what's going on. Listen, this pandemic is only shared because it's life or death. This government has done so many things under the table, behind the table, and only for its friends and lovers. The Bahamian people have already judged them. I will go no further than that. So they get
So let's take now the overall grade, and we used to get on the report card teacher's response at the end or comments at the end. So give us an overall grade and your comments on the overall performance thus far.
I'm starting where I ended. I think the government's indications when it came to office that it will be transparent with the Bahamian people do not deserve any credit at all. I think the brightest light in this government's administration was the handling of the pandemic. Outside that, this government has been a total failure to the majority of the Bahamian people, except for the few. And I will not go into calling what those few means.
Okay, so I want to move to another issue, something that has been playing out with this administration quite frequently in the past few months. But I want to reference something that happened previously, and then we'll sort of go forward with that. In 2015, you were at the center of a controversy after it was alleged that you had abused your powers as minister responsible for local government by offering legal advice to the Maguana Family Island administrator and ended in the release of a person the magistrate had just sentenced days earlier. In lieu of the allegations, you invited the Prime Minister at the time, Prime Minister Christie, to relieve you of your duties as Minister responsible for local government, and you continue to serve in other portfolios as Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources. Let's talk about what drove that action, and why was it that you weren't relieved of all cabinet portfolios?
Well, let me just say that I was driven to assist a man whose arm was broken allegedly by the police. The mother called to say that her son's arm was broken and the police had refused him medical attention. I thought, as the member of parliament, has nothing to do with power. I had an obligation to seek through the administrator that he got the medical relief that he needed. The police did not like that. And so they turned it into my doing something untoward. And as I said then, if I had to redo it, I would do it again, because my purpose was honorable. It was very humane. It was for the purpose of seeking medical attention. And the record was clear. I brought the record to the house. When the man was eventually examined, he had a broken arm. And that's the only reason why.
I understand. Sorry, I remember the story quite clearly. Mm-hmm.
That's it. Now, if that was wrong, I take full responsibility for it. Having said that, when the FNM marched and beat on the table and everything else, I told the Prime Minister I would happily step aside as minister responsible for local government, because that is the ministry that is responsible for Family Island affairs and the Family Island administrators. And he obliged and relieved me of that portfolio. And I continue with agriculture and fisheries and marine resources.
So why not relieve you of all ministerial duties at that point, considering the level of controversy that came with this?
Well, because the Prime Minister believed what I did was done for the right reason. It wasn't for me or anything that any reasonable person would say he should not have done. And so you have to look at the picture and see whether the action fits the decision the prime minister made.
So how does that differ for you from the situation involving now former Minister Dwayne Sands, who would have agreed to allow some medical supplies to land on a plane, and that eventually, when it had been stated that the airport was closed, etc., and you had to get special permission, and according to him, this was being done for the right reason, to bring in things that could save lives in terms of the test kits for the COVID-19 test. How was your situation different, or how do you see it different from a Dwayne Sands who resigned and the Prime Minister accepted his resignation?
Well, I believe the Prime Minister accepted Dwayne's resignation because he wanted to get rid of Dwayne. Because some other ministers have done more egregious things and he has not done anything about or for or to them. So that seemed to have been personal to me. That's my observation. So it's different only in the sense that the Bahamian people will have to be the judge. Whether I should have sought help for a sick man whose arm was broken, or what Dr. Sands did and broke some order that was made by the Prime Minister, which that's for them.
Do you think he should have resigned, or do you think he should have stayed on?
I think he was forced to resign because the Prime Minister wanted him out.
All right.
I don't think it has to do with, I don't believe it only had to do with what he did, because some other ministers were involved in the same thing he did and they didn't go. I think he wanted to get rid of Dr. Sands. That's my personal view, and I will tell the Prime Minister that to his face.
Interesting. So let's talk now about the case of now former Deputy Prime Minister and now former Minister of Finance, K. Peter Turnquest, who recently also stepped down pending investigations into allegations brought against him in a capacity outside of his role in government. Was that the right thing to do?
Well, the Peter Turnquest fiasco is a horse of a different color. Whenever you are caught up, whether rightly or wrongly, in fraudulent allegations, any interpretation of fraud suggests some criminality. If he had not been the Prime Minister, perhaps he would be before the criminal courts, because fraud by nomenclature is a crime. Now, I don't know the details, but I think he was right to either resign or be fired, because ordinary people caught up in fraudulent activities or activities which take hard-earned money from the innocent, in my view, is a crime. I don't know in any other way as a lawyer, but they took the matter to court civilly. But in the eyes of the public, $30 million, according to the paperwork, was defrauded from people who gave the money believing they were giving it for a particular purpose, and it turned out not to be so. Mr. Turnquest has a lot to answer for the allegation made. It is not a personal matter for me because I do wish him well, but I think his coming out of the front line of politics was the right thing to do, because the average Bahamian interpret fraud to be of a criminal nature.
Okay. Final thing as we get into this. I'm going to throw it to you now to the PLP. Are you confident that the PLP is in a position to win the next election with Philip Brave Davis as leader, as well as some of the candidates who are already offering themselves?
Well, the Bahamian people will have to answer that. But for my part, Mr. Davis is an unproven candidate for prime ministership, just like Mr. Minnis was in 2017. And I believe the Bahamian people gave him a chance. And I would hope that they would give Mr. Davis a chance, because it can't be worse. It cannot be worse. And Mr. Davis, in my view, is a hard-working man. Now, he may not have the gift of the gap, meaning he may not be a good public speaker and rally. He may not be that kind, but I can tell you his reputation for honesty, hard work, and delivering on promises is legendary in the field in which he grew and developed.
Mr. Gray, unfortunately, we are out of time for the segment. I could have gone on a lot longer, but you didn't disappoint me. From the moment I said, let's get him on the show, I knew we were going to have a good conversation, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure people enjoy hearing from you still. I know you still have a lot to offer. Yes or no? Are you back in the race next election, or are you still on the sidelines?
No, I'm not interested in running again. Those 5 islands have left me wanting.
I understand.
But I am going to fight. I am going to campaign because it is my personal view that this government has to go.
Well, sir, thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us. I appreciate your candid commentary. It was good to hear from you and refreshing. Continue to keep well. Nice seeing you again, sir, after all this time.
Thank you so much, Jerome, and I do hope that I did not disappoint.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. You delivered. That was good. Thank you so very much, sir. Have a good day. Well, when we return, folks, we're going to speak to the current parliamentarian for the Long Island constituency, who's also the executive chairman of the Water and Sewerage Corporation. Stay with us. Project really pays itself.
Correct.
They set up
At the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight, discussing the realities of politics. My guest for this segment of the show is an attorney at law, educator, and entrepreneur by profession from Long Island. In 2017, under the FNM's banner, he was elected as the Member of Parliament for the Long Island constituency and was subsequently appointed Executive Chairman of the Water and Sewerage Corporation. I'm happy to have back on my show after some time, Adrian Gibson. Welcome back to On the Record. He's laughing because it's been a long time since you've been on here, but that's not from a lack of trying, but that's fine.
Yes. It's been a while. I'm happy to be with you, my friend. You know, you and I go way back. And
very much so.
Always,
I like when people give disclaimers at the top of the show so they know we go way back. So when we get to Rowan, they know it ain't personal.
Yeah.
All right. So let's first of all talk about your role as Executive Chairman of Water and Sewage. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it's been, but let us sort of, if you can, quickly sort of bring us up to date on some of the challenges you've had trying to keep the corporation going in these very difficult times.
Firstly, Jerome, let me again thank you for inviting me back to your show. I always tell you that this is the best show of this format in the country, and so I'm always pleased to be here. With respect to water and sewage, we have been having severe financial challenges over the last few months. As you know, with COVID being a disease that impacts, for which you must maintain the greatest hygiene, water plays a great part in that. That led to us having to take a policy position to remove the threat of disconnections and not disconnect any person on water and sewage's account so that they would have access to water. That was from March to present day. Given that, we found that many persons, even civil servants, have not come in to make a payment, and we have suffered massive losses. This is compounded by Hurricane Dorian, where we lost our second largest revenue, Abaco. As at September of this year, we'd lost some 90% in terms of revenue from Abaco year to date, having only collected $225,000 in September, as at September, versus last year up to September, some 2.1 million. As at present date, November, that position has hardly changed. We've again suffered massive losses in Abaco. The same is applying to other islands as well. As you know, any business must collect monies to be able to function. You have staff salaries to pay. In our case, we have water providers to pay. You saw an incident recently with a water vendor.
So, what?
We have other
How?
to pay as well.
Help us to understand now how all of this plays out. There's a side of you that's trying to run a business, an essential service to the country. There are health concerns that have to be taken into consideration as we are in a position or a state that we've never been in before. And you've got some political realities that are always staring you, right down, no matter what you do. How do you balance all of that and keep all of this going? But you've always got to consider, what is my future in politics going to look like as I'm making these decisions?
I call it a delicate balance. Obviously, water and sewage has to maintain its social responsibilities. Obviously, the government is the shareholder, the only stakeholder, and government has taken the position that we're not going to allow any of our people to not have water during this pandemic, in order to cause the pandemic not to spread and get out of hand, and that we are going to be as accommodating as possible. One of the things we've been pursuing is subventions from government. We've been trying to encourage persons to come in and make payments, as much as possible, and we've been trying also to find the balance where our staff understand the financial position we are in. Okay, it also requires our vendors to understand. We have some very reasonable vendors, and then we have some who are not so reasonable. And so there are some vendors who are willing to take a payment onto their bill, given the circumstances, and then they allow us to remain. And then there are others who, do as you saw in Central Eleuthera the other day.
And when you are confronted with those types of situations, and again, I keep reminding people that when you're in government, you always have to consider the political realities. When something like an Eleuthera situation begins to play out, how do you manage something like that and the fallout from that?
It's very difficult. You're mobilizing internal teams. There's a lot of behind the scenes activity. But Jerome, people have to understand that, during this time, we all have to work together. In the case of the vendor in Eleuthera, that vendor would have made about 70 plus million from the Water and Sewerage Corporation over the last 15 or so years. Okay, and in addition to that, we had paid that vendor some 2+ million right before that time. Okay, and I think there was a balance of maybe roughly $1 million plus $2 million that we were talking behind the scenes about paying and how to arrange a payment plan. However, they saw it differently, and in executing their threat, they decided to not only tell the Water and Sewerage Corporation and the Office of the Prime Minister and so on that they were going to carry out this threat, but they actually followed through with it. Okay, so what we had to do is there's been an instance in the past where we've had to send in a water and sewage team to literally go in and run a plant to avoid them doing that in another instance. So this isn't the first occasion that this has happened. When we see such things, we recognize that maybe is a vendor that we need to not continue to deal with, because if we are partners in this, right, and we all are facing the pandemic, I'm sure that whilst we are having our challenges, they're having their challenges as well. But if we are moving to make a payment onto the bills, right, a substantive payment to the tune of millions, then obviously that's not someone who's trying to avoid making payment. And you add to the fact that you've made 70 million over the last 15 years.
I want to sort of jump forward now to some direct, political questions as we're getting into that season. The FNM has had to deal with quite a bit since they've been into office, and I wanted to get your feedback on, how do you think your party, the government that you are working under and with, has responded, and how would you grade the response to? Let's start out with Hurricane Dorian, and what is your party's and government's response to that?
Even before Hurricane Dorian, there was Hurricane Irma. You recall that?
Yes.
I think the government has done uh, phenomenally well considering the challenges. You've had multiple hurricanes. You've had this COVID pandemic, which is perhaps the worst pandemic, the greatest pandemic the world has seen in the last 100+ years. Um, all of these things together has greatly impacted the economy. Yet the government has continued to maintain its staffing levels as best as possible. No civil servant can say that they've not been paid. Government has continued to try to carry out projects that were on the drawing board and try to balance the public interests with the economy. The reality is, the government we've not made every decision perfectly. Okay, no one is perfect, only God himself. But this government has done quite well. We're trying to address the ongoing concerns and with meeting these unexpected challenges. Because when you come in, you have your own plans. This is saying that man plans and God laughs. You have your plan when you
To do it. But final thing, and my producer's row. I mean, you out there campaigning yet?
Yeah, Jerome, I have something called the continuous campaign.
Okay.
For my God elected, I continue to do my job and to move around the community and let people know and see what is happening. And so I've conducted the continuous campaign. I never stopped and don't intend to.
Okay. Good to know. Adrian, we're out of time, but I promise you, you will be back in 2021. We have a lot to talk about. We're trying to pivot off of this COVID discussion a bit. We've been here for so long, and we know that the political season has started. So we have lots of shows to do in the upcoming year, and we'll get you to talk. Keep up the good work at Water and Sewerage Corporation. Thank you for keeping that water on. I'm one of those residents who I tell people I am on. We call it city water, and I appreciate that. So thank you so very much. Keep it up, and continue to be safe out there.
Thank you. I look forward to coming back.
All right. That's going to do it, though, for this edition of On the Record, our show tonight, The Realities of Politics. Special thanks to all my guests, my technical and production team. Thank you so very much. And, of course, to you, our viewers, I wish to say thank you so very much. And before we go, a very special happy birthday to my senior graphic designer here at RTV. She's also responsible for the great graphics you see here on The Record. That goes out to Lynette Lockhart, who's celebrating her birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, Lynette, from all of us to you. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place, right here on The Record.